Hey everyone, today we're going to cover the workflow for UV mapping complex objects in Maya. I will be using Maya for this demo, but the concepts and workflows discussed here can be applied to any 3D software. This video is part of a series on how to prepare real-time game-ready assets in a real production pipeline. This video is focused on how to UV map complex objects and how to quickly set up UDIMs in Maya. As always, a like, subscribe, and share is always appreciated as I continue to grow the content of this channel. So with that, let's get started. Alright, so here we are in Maya, and you can see that I have the cyberpunk grenade that I've been working on the past few videos. I've just wrapped up the optimization process, and we have a grenade here, which is on the higher poly side, but still optimized at about 24,000 triangles. So now what I want to do is go ahead and start UV mapping and unwrapping this object. So what I want to do first is start with the most complex object, which is going to be the top and the bottom grenade. Obviously, the techniques that I'm going to be applying to the top grenade can be applied to the bottom and really any other object within this scene. So I'll go ahead and select the object, hit Ctrl 1 to isolate, and we can begin the UV mapping process. Now, always the first step I recommend is making sure to select your objects, and really this can be done to every object here, and going ahead and freezing transforms and deleting history as well. Alright, that just gives you a clean slate. I know on the last video that was the one thing that I forgot to mention, and that just makes sure everything properly unfolds. Then go to UV editor, and then now you can see we just have a mess of UVs. Now this step isn't 100% necessary, but what I typically do is just go to edit, delete. And that just goes ahead and deletes all the UVs, all the messy UVs on our object, and I don't have to worry about that. And it doesn't clutter up our UV editor workspace here. So now I can go ahead and again select the top part of the grenade, and we can begin UV mapping. Now what I typically do first when I start the process is go to Create, Camera Based. So now we need UVs to begin cutting this, all right, and adding in seams. Now, the next part that I want to do is actually start cutting in the seams. So the workflow that I use here is essentially I want to break this up into the least amount of pieces possible, but with as many pieces as I need to get nice, clean, properly unfold UVs and UV mapped UVs. So what I mean by that is now I can go into hold Control right click and go to edge mode. And you can see I can start selecting edges here. Now there's a variety of ways you can start selecting edges and faces. One thing that I like to do is actually go to face mode and select maybe this bottom piece. So I want to separate this piece here. If I go ahead and look at this though, I know that I'm going to want to break up essentially where all the natural seams are and where there are flat surfaces. Those would be the best places to add your seams. So if I go ahead and start selecting this, what I'm going to want to do now actually is if I go ahead and just kind of bring this in a little bit so I have more room here, go to the modeling toolkit on your right, top right, and then go ahead and switch on symmetry. And I'll go ahead and do it based on my axis of symmetry, which is going to be world X. So then now that I've done that, I can also go ahead and enable selection constraint. And I want to go ahead and select angle, and I use typically around 10 or 15 degrees. And what that does, that allows me to kind of select flat surfaces like this, and it just allows you to select larger faces here and makes sure that you don't, reduces the amount of clicks that you have to do. All right, so you can start cutting seams, but what I can do here, there's a couple different ways to do this, is if I go ahead and turn off angle here, I can go to Control right click, and then we can go to edges and do edge perimeter. And you can see this creates a perimeter of edges that I can simply go ahead and cut, or what I can do is I can go ahead and actually add to this selection. So I'll go ahead and select this face here, shift click the neighboring face, and then now it'll select the edge loop or the face loop running all the way around. And I want to make sure that I got all those faces, and it looks like, yep, we got everything. And then now what I can do is instead of cutting, I can use a different technique, which is Control right click or Shift right click, and I can do a create UV shell. So watch what that does now. If I go ahead and select my grenade now, you can see that I've went ahead and taken a face loop and created a UV shell from that, which is exactly what I wanted to do. So now I can do the same thing on the other part of the grenade, and I'm essentially just breaking it up into pieces. I can go back and select angle constraint, and this technique works well when you can't select clean edges and edge flows, right? For example, if I go back to my sub-D grenade and the original edge flow and topology here, you can see that the edge flow is a lot cleaner, and I can select edges and face loops and all throughout the model. But when you have optimized assets like game models, and you have a lot of triangles because of that, the selecting edge loops and face loops is a lot harder to do, which is why I use this technique of selecting, angle selecting and converting selections here. So I'll go ahead again, back to this object, and you can see again, I can just kind of select these here, and I can just start again, selecting all the large pieces that I need and just working my way around it. And we can work with this here and something like this. And you can just do whatever works for you. If you wanted to do it by edges or if you want to do it with edge selection, I'm just showing you different ways of essentially doing the same thing here. And so now I can hold Shift right click and do create UV shell. All right. And if I double click that, we can see we're starting to break this up into more and more pieces. Now what I'll do is show you the edge cut method. So now if I go in here and turn off the angle selection, and I can start going in here now and going ahead and selecting these edge loops here. So this one will work fine. And I'm going to go ahead and actually split this, or I'll go ahead and leave this as is for now. Maybe I'll go ahead and separate it from this inner piece here. So I will go ahead and split these edges. So I'm selecting these edges. And then now if I hold Shift right click, I can do a cut. And that's going to go ahead and cut that into a nice separate piece there. So you can start to see what's happening here. And then now you can see all of these objects inside here, which get fairly intricate. I can use the exact same technique as I have throughout the rest of the model. So what I want to do now is go ahead and hold Shift right click and go back to angle select, and I can start selecting these faces in here just like this, and I can separate these out as separate shells, because these, if we look at my pure ref based off this cyberpunk grenade concept here, and we pull that up there, you can see that I'm going to be going for this illuminated self-emissive material on the inside, so I'm going to need those to be separate materials anyways. So separate textures, material properties and whatnot. So I go ahead and select those, and then I can simply go Shift right click and then create UV shell. There we go. And then now I can go ahead and move that. You can see that it's separated that off. So we're just still creating seams right now. And then everything's looking pretty good so far. And what I'm going to need to do for sure is also, we can see that this is a separate material here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a natural seam there. So the easiest way to probably start with is definitely find your natural seams on your objects and separate, where objects are separated by material. And that's where you're going to be focusing on creating the seams. So I can go ahead and just continue that. And we're working our way around the model, and we have good clean edges that's working, that works well for the most part, just a few clicks. And I can do this. All right. So these work well. And then what I can do is probably take these and also cut in on this edge that's right on the inside. So we have those, and make sure we don't miss any edges here. Going all the way around. So we're just kind of selecting these edges. Great. So we got this, and this is looking pretty good, and I can go ahead and Shift right click and cut that now. And then we can go ahead and double click on our main object, and we can see that we did leave one object there, which is no big deal. We can just find this trouble area here. So I'll just highlight my UVs, and there we go. We can see that this is the missing edge here, or the missing UV. Looks like it's trying to see where this is here. And we can cut that. Maybe it's on another piece here. So it's attached. Oh, right here, right on the inside, right there. So if I go ahead, there it is. Okay, so, and you're seeing how I'm just kind of using this as I'm moving these and separating these around, it's just making it easier to find where these objects are, so that are attached. There we go. So now we've gone ahead and separated that out completely, and things are looking good. And what I can do now is just do a simple select all, and then go ahead and do an unfold. And that's going to go ahead and unfold these objects, and I can go ahead now and start to clean up and organize these. And what I want to do is for these objects here, which are getting a little bit crazy, actually what I'm going to do is select this object, and we're going to do a modify layout. I open up the settings here, and we're going to bring this over, and typically the main thing that I keep here is texture map size, and set that to 2K, and then we're just going to pack that so we can just clearly see everything inside of here, which is good. Now, the one thing that you can see is that there may be a couple areas that we have to clean up, and we definitely need to clean up or add another seam on these areas here. So if I actually expand this and we start to take a look at our checkerboard here, you can start to see where things are becoming skewed and whatnot. So you're going to want to make sure to go to view and look at UV distortion, and where you get a lot of blue and a lot of red, that's where you want to be adding your seams. All right, so if I go to view here, I already know that I need to kind of clean up the inside of these pieces here, and it looks like I accidentally goofed right here. Sometimes with the symmetry it makes it a little bit hard to find that object. Let me go ahead and turn this off. Maybe I'll go ahead and select the face. And there we go. So it looks like I just over selected some things, which isn't a big deal. What I can do is go ahead and select these pieces. And actually what I need to do is cut this here, and cut this here. So just go to wherever those places are cut. And then what I can do is select the places that it needs to be merged back and do actually it's going to be right here under cut and sew. And then you can do a stitch together. And then boom, did you see that? It just jumped back where it needed to be. So we can do a stitch together here. All right, so I just went ahead and just cleaned up any areas that I may have missed, but you can see that everything's looking pretty good now. And what I can do now is just start to rearrange and organize these UVs a bit. So I'm going to turn off symmetry here, and I'm going to just go ahead and rotate this. Now the one thing is, if I wanted to, I could also split this main part here and get a little bit more of a separation between one side versus the other. If you wanted to, I mean, you certainly can. This is a lot of times how I do faces, and then I go ahead and cut this, and then I separate these two and do an unfold. All right, you can see, so that way I can maybe move these around and be a little bit more optimized with my space. So it really depends on what you need or what you are trying to achieve with your models. And then now that I have that, I go ahead and just straighten everything so I avoid having anything at an angle here. Okay, now I want to avoid having things at an angle, because having things on an angle when dealing with pixels always leads to aliasing, and those are those little jaggies that you're always having to worry about with limited pixels. So I want to make sure everything's nice and oriented straight, so I'll go ahead and do that real quick and then skip forward. All right, I have everything straightened out, and then I need to make sure that I go ahead and cut these edges on the bottom. I also want to make sure to turn off my angle selection so that's not getting in the way. And then I can go ahead and start cutting these bottom pieces here. And what I typically will do is just select this one edge here, not double click, just a single edge. And I'll go ahead and select it like so, kind of working my way around. And I'll move that over to the side and a single click. And having symmetry on would probably be helpful at this point, but I'll go ahead and quickly select these. All right, all of those are selected. And then I can simply do a shift right click cut and I can select all of these objects here. And really I can just select everything all over again and do another unfold, and there you go. And so we're starting to get that to unfold a little bit nicer. And if you wanted to, there's a way to simply unwrap this or straighten the UVs here. And I cover that in a specific video, so definitely take a look at that. I did that a few videos ago, but for now, this will work for what I'm trying to do. So with all of this done here, I can go ahead now and do another layout here. Again, to get to that, you want to go to Modify, Layout, and then you can just select the options and then apply that. And then it'll repack everything here, all right? And then you want to make sure to straighten everything as well. All right, and there we go. And I think right now, if I take a look at the checkerboard and we take a look at the UV distortion, we're getting minimal distortion. If things are a little bit light red, a little bit pink, we can make some adjustments here. I'd say want to fix this area here. So if I go ahead and turn off the UV distortion, so you can just hit 7 is the shortcut to toggle that. I'm going to go ahead now and separate this piece here running along the edge, because that's clearly causing or going to cause some distortion when we go to texture it. And we can just kind of work our way around. And I did turn off symmetry, but this should be a couple quick clicks here. And I can go ahead and select that. Great. And then now I can go ahead and... Actually, I need to make sure to select it all the way up until this part here. All right. And then now I can do a cut. And actually, if we do this while looking at the distortion, we should see this clean up quite nicely. So if I go ahead and select these two and do an unfold, look at that. So that really cleans up and helps prevent a lot of distortion. And there's a little bit kind of running along this object here, but what I'm going to try to do is see how it looks like when I texture it, and if it does cause issues, I can come back and try to alleviate some of that issue on this curved surface. But I haven't had issues when dealing with something like this. I see this a lot when I do characters and whatnot. All right, so again, hit 7 to toggle that. And then if you go ahead and relay out everything, we're looking pretty good here. All right, so to recap, I'll apply these techniques one more time on another object here. So if I go ahead and grab maybe this one on the top of the grenade here, the steps are to freeze transforms, delete histories, and then delete UVs, which we've already done. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and create camera-based UVs. Now that we've created camera-based UVs, we can now go ahead and start selecting the edges and seams that we want. And we basically want to just do it for these hard surface objects. We want to do it right on where you kind of find natural cuts, natural seams, which is typically going to be on machined metal. I mean, sometimes you have cast metal, but there's no way around it. And with texturing software, it's not a big deal. I should need to clean this up here. And remember to turn on symmetry. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that one on for World Z here. And it looks like I do need to resymmetry this object here, but it should be fine for what we're trying to show. So if I go ahead now and select this object, and yeah, when you definitely do your UVs, you start to notice some issues in topology and whatnot, or a little bit of cleanup that needs to happen. Happens all the time, so don't worry about it. I wanted to make sure to at least show you the process. It's never as smoothly as you would hope, but hopefully you definitely get the idea of how to go about it. And I'll go ahead and just keep cutting in here. So you can do this with either the face selection method that I showed you, a combination of both, or just edge selection. So you can see all of these that I selected, and I'd say I'd probably select this one running along the bottom too. All right, so now I've gone ahead and selected the seams. We can do a shift right click, do a cut, and then we switch to hold right click and switch to UV mode, marquee select everything, and do an unfold. And there you go. And then now we want to go ahead and straighten everything out and move some things. You can start to see, okay, well, we missed some edges here, no big deal. We can go ahead and cut that and do another unfold, and that should unfold properly. And something like this. All right, and if you start to get some weird squiggles and stuff like that, I would go ahead and again just kind of, cut it on any main angles that you'd have on the model. So something like this should unfold a little bit nicer. There you go. And I'll go ahead now and simply rotate everything. Now, of course, this is where I'd want to turn off symmetry and just focusing on just making sure everything's nice and either completely horizontal, planar essentially here, and avoiding angles to avoid aliasing issues. And something like this should be fine. And we're starting to get some nice UVs. And then once I do that, I can simply go ahead to modify and do a quick layout. Open up my layout settings. Actually, you don't need to settings if you already set them, and then just do a quick layout with the object selected. So modify, layout, or Control L, and there you go. All right. Now, the one thing that I wanted to show you is, how to do UDIMs. So that wraps up all of the unwrapping. These are the techniques that I use and I will be using on the rest of the object. So hopefully you found that helpful. So now we're going to quickly jump over to understanding what UDIMs are. All right. Now UDIMs are, you can see here that I have these objects here completely packed on what's called the one-to-one UV space. Okay. You can actually take a look here and see this is just a coordinate grid. And what I highly recommend is, I'll drop this link in the description, is to take a look at some good references. There is one here, which is the UDIM workflow, which you can see here. It lets you know that this is the coordinate system going, essentially like a 2D graph. So as you're going to the right, you can see that it's 1000, and then 1001, 1003, 1004, and 5. And then as you're going up, it becomes 1000, 1011, 1021. And you can have tons and tons of UDIMs here. Now, you may be wondering, when or why you would need to use UDIMs. And I have an example here in Photoshop. So what we have here in Photoshop is a 2K map. All right. Now, I'm creating this prop as a high detailed hero asset, as in you're going to be able to get pretty close to this grenade. If the grenade was kind of sitting here off to the side, if it was a background prop or in the character's hand all the time, I wouldn't have to worry about it. But this is going to be in your face. You're going to be able to zoom in on this and look all around. So I need the texture density to support that. Now, working with just a simple 2K map isn't going to cut it. Now, you could take a 2K map and turn it into a 4K map, but then that starts to give you a lot more texture resolution, which is sometimes what you want. But if you see that this may not even be enough, and you start to go up to the next power of 2, which is going to be 8192, now it's like, well, I didn't need this much. I wanted to land somewhere in between, having maybe between 4 UDIMs and maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see that it essentially is multiplying it twice, right? And then if you go up to 16, it is a massive amount, right, of texture memory. So UDIMs are more efficient because it gives you more control to lay out your UVs in a way that you don't have to work with 8K and 16K maps, all right? And this is a technique used in film and VFX, and it is being used in game industries now. So it's definitely something I at least want to touch on. You may or may not need this, but it's definitely something I wanted to quickly cover, okay? So now that we understand what UDIMs are, how do we set it up? First, we need to make sure that we actually lay this out properly, right? So if I go ahead and let's say for this one object, I want this to have 3 UDIMs, right? Or I want it to have 3 UVs here. Well, the way to do this is I can start taking these objects here, and you can start to do this manually and repack it yourself. So if I know I want these 2 objects here to be on 1 UV, or if I want maybe this inner part here on a separate UV shell, I can. So you can see how you can start to select and separate that. I'll actually move this one over here too, since that's part of that. And I can select these here as well. And we get this. So I'm just selecting all of these key pieces, right? And you can see you can start to move things. And I think there's one more object that I need. So you can start to get that, and what that's going to do is, again, give us more texture density, right, and texture resolution. The other thing to keep in mind is, as you're doing this, you can see that I can show the checker map here. It'll let you know where it is on the coordinate system. So you can see that this is 1003, this is 1002, and this is 101 or 1001, 1002, 1003. So now that I have that, you can kind of adjust things. Well, one thing that you can do is use the layout to kind of get you going. And you can tell it, hey, I want this to be 1, 2, 3 UV tiles, right? So again, to get here, you go to Modify, Layout, right over here. And then under Tiles U, that's where we want this to be on the horizontal axis. So this would be the U axis, V is going vertical. And then I go ahead and hit Apply, and then watch it pack it, and there you go. So see how it packed it. Now, it's not perfect. It doesn't 100% know where things should be, but it does a really good job, right? So I can I can kind of rearrange some things. I can say, all right, well, I know this is going to come back here. It's going to stay with this object. I'll swap this one over here. And then you can just do whatever manipulation and adjustments that you need, okay? So, and the one thing too is, if you wanted to make sure that this is all what's called the same texel density, so sometimes you can do this where you scale one up, an area up more than another. Well, what you can do is maybe, you know, if I scale these up a little bit, that's where you can go over here under, I believe it's transform, and you can get the texel density. So you can select this object here, and you can get this texel density, and then you can select everything and then set that texel density there as well. And then you're gonna have to do some manual repacking, readjustment, but take a look at how that fixed that texel density, right? So it just made sure, if I redo that and undo that, it made sure everything is the same. Sometimes you need that and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you can get away with having different texel densities. But for the most part, it's best practices to have the same texel densities for your entire model, all right? So again, for the purposes of this demo, I'll simply do a quick repack here, and we'll pack this here. And what I want to do now is show you how to actually set up your textures. Now, this part's easy, this one to apply it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up Windows Explorer here, and we're going to take a look at these textures. Now, you saw me pop this earlier or show this earlier, but if you're looking for some good UV checker maps, I highly recommend this by Valley. And it's the UV checker map maker. And I mean, this thing is so cool, you know, and I'd say donate to support them. And you can do all sorts of things, change things. I just started using this. It's really, really cool. And really, really nice to create just differing UV checker maps, because I want to create different checker maps for this UDIM test. Now, all you need to do, at least for your textures, because I will be showing how to set this up and texture this in Substance, is you need to just take whatever the name of the object is, which is here UV checker, and then you use the coordinate. This is why those numbers are important. So you do .1001, right? And then same thing here, UV checker 1002, right? UV checker 1003. So now that we know that, what Maya does and what these engines do and render engines do is it uses what's called texture streaming, or it can stream in and preview these textures here. So what I'll do is turn off this preview here, and I'm gonna assign a new material. So now that we have our UVs all set up here, now we can go ahead and assign a material and apply the UDIM texture. So if I go ahead and hold Shift right click, I'm gonna assign a new material. And I'm gonna just do a simple Phong for this test. And then if I go ahead and delete history on this, and go ahead and take a look at this, I can just call this UDIM test. And what I want to do now is load in just simply on the color, just to make sure that this is working properly. So I hit the dialog box here, and I go to File to load in a texture. Now I go ahead and select image name, and I grab UV checker 1001 or 1001, hit open. And then I want to go ahead and make sure to hit 6 on the keyboard. And we can see, okay, not bad, but this just applied this as a normal texture. Now, you have to go back to the texture settings here, and you have to tell Maya, hey, for UV tiling mode here, we want to make sure to use UDIM. So right here, UV tiling mode, and then do UDIM. Now it says Mari, but Substance Painter now supports UDIMs as well. So it's just a general UDIM support. So you go ahead and hit that. Then it's going to kind of black out, and it's just saying, hey, to visualize your texture, generate all tile previews. So all this means is, hey, this red box here, it says, click me. So just simply click it. And there you go. So now you can take a look at the 3 different checkers, the 3 different UV tiles that we have here. We have the ones that are inside here on UV 1001. So those are these checkers here. We have 1002, which is on the, it should be this side, which is going to be this object here, or this texture here. And then we can see that we have 1003, 1003, and that's going to be this checker system here. All right, and that's that. All right, so that's how you unwrap complex objects. This is the workflow I use for everything, and I cover a lot of UV mapping in other tutorials, so definitely take a look at that. I have a playlist for that. So to recap that, you delete UVs, create camera-based UVs, turn on symmetry and start creating seams, unfold, and then pack and lay out. Then we took a look at UDIMs, and we understood why you'd want to use UDIMs, where you start to need a lot of that resolution without having to bump up to a massive amount of maybe 16K or 8K, and you want to land somewhere in between. And you just need texture resolution. All right. So and it's a workflow being adopted more and more in the real-time industry. It's being well adopted. It's been in the film and VFX industry for a while now. So hopefully you found this helpful. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or even tips and suggestions of your own, let me know down below. The next video I should be covering how to set this up and bringing it into Substance Painter with UDIM support. So with that, I hope you found this helpful, and thanks for watching. Take care, everyone.